10 Stoic morning habits. Fix 80% of your problems by noon. You don't wake up once, you wake up twice. The first time is biological, automatic. Your body rises, your eyes open, your nervous system restarts like a machine plugged back in. But the second awakening, the one that really matters and is conscious, and most people miss it entirely. They rise, but they don't return. They move, but they're not here. They're gone before the day even begins. This is the first hidden habit of a Stoic morning, the conscious reclamation of awareness. You must take your mind back before the world tries to claim it, before the algorithms, before the inbox, before the past wakes up in you. Because every single day, something invisible tries to own your first thought, and the moment you forget this, you lose your power. The Stoics knew nothing is neutral at the start of the day. Your first thoughts shape the filter through which every moment will be judged. If your first thought is defensive, your day becomes a battle. If it's regretful, the day becomes a punishment. If it's distracted, the day becomes a blur. But if it's intentional, grounded, awake, the day becomes yours. That's why the Stoic doesn't wake up. He returns, not to the chaos of the world, but to his inner seat, that place where nothing external can dictate who he is. And this return happens in the space of a few silent seconds. It happens before the phone is unlocked, before the plans are reviewed, before the masks are put back on. When you reclaim your consciousness, you're not just saying, "I'm awake." You're saying, "I choose to begin." And not from fear, not from noise, but from clarity. This choice is subtle, almost invisible, but it's everything. You pause, you breathe, you observe. Not the ceiling, not the to-do list, but your own awareness. You meet yourself in the rawest state, unmasked, unguarded, untouched by the day. And you ask the question few ask in that moment, what is here before thought? This is not a practice of denial. It's not positive thinking. It's presence before content. Because if you don't claim that space, the world will fill it for you, with headlines, with anxieties, with someone else's priorities. This habit isn't about routines, it's about sovereignty. It's about remembering each morning that you are not the thoughts you inherit from yesterday. You are not the tension your body holds from last week. You are not the failure that visits your mind when you're half asleep and defenseless. You are the one who sees. The Stoics didn't say control everything, they said control the beginning, because beginnings contain power. The power to set direction, the power to cancel noise before it multiplies. The power to stand on your own mind before others climb on it. So when you wake up tomorrow, don't rush, don't react, return. Sit in the silence between the dream and the demand and reclaim your post. The first thought of the day does not belong to chance. It belongs to you, not to the world. You decide. The calibration of inner weight. Not everything that enters your mind deserves the same weight. But most people, upon waking, treat every thought with equal urgency. A delayed message, a small debt, a look someone gave you yesterday, a comment you still don't understand, all of it gets thrown on the same emotional scale. And without noticing, you begin the day heavy, bloated with things that don't belong to this moment. This is what the Stoics warned us about, allowing the trivial to feel vital, allowing what is fleeting to feel permanent. That's why the second habit of the Stoic morning is this, the calibration of inner weight. A daily refinement of what deserves your full attention and what doesn't even deserve a reaction. You start by observing the first emotional impulses that rise. Don't judge them, just meet them as signals. One tells you to rush, another tells you to worry. One wants you to defend yourself, another tries to convince you you're behind. Before you let any of them drive, you ask, is this real? Is this necessary? Does this serve my path or distract me from it? The Stoic mind is like a scale. It doesn't reject the world. It just weighs everything before acting on it. And most importantly, it decides what not to carry. That decision is your liberation. The modern mind is addicted to volume. More input, more urgency, more reminders of what could go wrong. But the trained mind knows that the more you carry, the less you see. The more noise you accept, the more wisdom you ignore. The Stoic chooses weight, not based on intensity, but on value. There's a crucial distinction. What feels urgent is not always important, and what feels light can often be the one thing worth sitting with in silence. So the habit begins in stillness, a moment of self-inventory. You ask, what am I holding right now that doesn't belong to this day? Maybe it's an argument that ended days ago. Maybe it's shame dressed as responsibility. Maybe it's fear disguised as planning. Whatever it is, you name it, not to feed it, but to place it down. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It's active discernment. It's the art of saying this matters now and this doesn't. And when you practice this every morning, you begin to notice how much of your inner weight was never yours to carry in the first place. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And this suffering begins when we give equal mass to every mental projection. When we don't calibrate, we exaggerate. When we don't pause, we personalize. But when we weigh, we wake up, not into chaos, but into control. Each day brings with it dozens of invisible hands trying to pull you into their weight. But only you decide what stays. Only you decide what receives your inner effort. And so, before you pick up your phone, pick up your own scale. Weigh your fears, weigh your urgency, weigh your judgments, and dare to ask, is this mine? Is this true? Or am I just rehearsing heaviness out of habit? Freedom is not about escaping pressure. It's about becoming strong enough to carry only what's worth carrying. The positioning of identity. Every morning you wake up with a name, a face, a life, but also with a script that's been running quietly for years, and unless you interrupt it, it keeps running, even if it no longer fits. That's why the third Stoic habit isn't about action. It's about position, the positioning of identity. You don't just wake up and become yourself. You wake up and resume a version of yourself, often one built by memory, shame, habit, or expectation. The person who hesitates, the person who reacts, the person who's already convinced that today won't be different from yesterday. And this happens so subtly that you don't even question it. But the Stoic questions everything, especially the self. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself each morning that he was not his reputation, not his comforts, not his role. He was a soul trained to lead itself, a mind entrusted with power, a body borrowed from the world. Everything else was temporary. So here's the practice. Before you fully engage with the world, pause and ask, who am I stepping into today? Am I leading with fear or with clarity? Am I stepping into someone who defends their past, or someone who creates a new standard? You are not required to wake up as yesterday's version of you, and yet most do. They wear old emotions like armor. They preload old beliefs like weapons. They walk into new mornings with identities shaped by old defeats. The Stoic sees this and refuses to comply. He knows that identity is not static, it's positional. You don't become a Stoic by title. You become one by posture, by how you meet this exact morning, this exact test, this exact silence. And that posture begins with clarity about who is showing up today. You are not the person who failed. You are not the person who was abandoned. You are not the version of you that made poor choices. Those were events, not definitions. The Stoic understands this separation and sharpens it each morning. This isn't a fantasy of becoming someone else. It's the deliberate anchoring of who you refuse to be again. Maybe yesterday you collapsed. Maybe you avoided, maybe you ran. So be it, that was the cost of learning. But this morning is not part of that contract. It's a blank surface, a new negotiation. And the question is simple. Will you show up as the version you default to, or the version you were born to lead? This habit requires silence, not noise. You don't find identity in action. You find it in pause. In the moment you recognize the internal postures trying to take the lead, self-pity, control, defensiveness, guilt, and you say, not this morning, not anymore. You shift position, back to your core, back to the calm presence that doesn't need to argue, explain, or prove. The presence that just is, aligned, awake, and in command. And from that position you begin. Because when you rise each morning as the self you consciously chose, not the self that habit defaulted, you don't just change your day. You slowly dismantle the old architecture of who you used to be. Identity is not a conclusion, it's a position you assume. One morning at a time. The renunciation of unnecessary urgency. You are not late, you are not behind, you are not failing for moving slowly. But the world will try to convince you otherwise. Every morning. The moment your eyes open, an invisible pressure enters. Messages blink, notifications pile. Responsibilities rush in before you've even stood up straight. It all whispers the same lie. You must hurry or you'll lose. But this is a trap, a mental ambush disguised as discipline. The Stoics didn't start their mornings with panic. They started with presence. They understood that unnecessary urgency is not a sign of ambition. It's a sign of disconnection. And that's why the fourth habit of the Stoic morning is this: the deliberate renunciation of speed that does not serve you. This is not laziness, it's command. The most dangerous rush is the one that feels responsible, but is actually reactive. You're not rushing because something must be done. You're rushing because you don't know how to be still. And the world loves this, because a reactive person is easy to manipulate, easy to sell to, easy to exhaust. The Stoic refuses to be easy. Each morning becomes a line in the sand, a conscious rejection of movement that doesn't originate from clarity. Instead of launching into motion, you examine motion. Instead of letting the day push you, you meet the day on your own terms. Still, aware, deliberate. This habit doesn't mean moving slowly, it means moving freely. Because the truth is, you can't choose your pace if you're already pulled into the speed of others. You can't hear your own strategy if you're listening to the sirens of false urgency. You can't master the day if you're constantly apologizing to it. So the habit begins with a pause, not a dramatic one, just long enough to feel your breath. To remember, you do not owe the world an immediate answer. You are not a servant of deadlines you didn't set. You are not a machine that proves its worth by speed. You are a human mind, capable of command. And what do you command first? Your attention, your breathing, your presence. From there, everything else aligns. Seneca warned that life is not short. It only feels short when you spend it running. And this running, unchecked, becomes identity. You stop walking into moments with power and start sprinting through them with fear. Renounce that. In your morning silence, you say it without words. I do not chase, I build. I do not rush, I choose. I do not react, I respond. These aren't affirmations. They're truths you demonstrate through stillness, because when you start your day from stillness, you don't need motivation. You don't need alarms or slogans. You move when it's time, and you know when it's not. You move because you are ready, not because you are afraid. And in this renunciation, you reclaim something most never even noticed they lost: the right to begin your day at your own depth, not at someone else's speed. So slow down, not to delay life, but to meet it. The declaration of inner law. Every empire begins with a law, not a law shouted to the world, a law whispered within, a principle, a standard, a line that will not be crossed, not by others and not by yourself. Without this, you are not leading your life. You are renting it to circumstances. This is the fifth Stoic habit, the daily declaration of inner law. You may not realize it, but every morning, something inside you is already governing the rest. Something invisible is making decisions before words are even spoken. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's fear, maybe it's approval, guilt, routine, but it's there, running the show, unless you show up to lead. And you don't lead by force, you lead by code. Marcus Aurelius had his, so did Epictetus, and you must have yours. But here's the difference. They read theirs every morning. Repetition wasn't weakness, it was reinforcement. Because they knew the world has its own code, and it will try to write over yours. You wake up and the external rules try to slip in. Respond fast, prove your worth, avoid discomfort, seek applause, stay in motion. And if you don't consciously declare your law, these become yours by default, not because you chose them, but because you didn't challenge them. So the habit begins in solitude. You sit. You remember, what do I obey when no one is watching? What is sacred to me, even in silence? What principle will I not break, even if the world rewards me for breaking it? It might be honesty, discipline, dignity, restraint. It might be the refusal to lie to yourself, even when it would be easier. The exact values don't matter as much as the act of reclaiming them. Out loud, every morning, with quiet conviction. This is not about morality, it's about authorship. When you don't declare your law, someone else declares it for you. Society, culture, algorithms. They slip in through screens, through suggestions, through 1,000 invisible nudges. And soon, you're obeying what you never even agreed to. The Stoic refuses to drift. He writes his law in the soul, not to feel superior, but to stay anchored. Because when the day pulls, when temptation whispers, when emotions rise, you don't look for strength in the moment. You draw it from the code you already declared. The declaration doesn't need to be long. It only needs to be true. It might be as simple as, I will not betray my mind for approval, or today I serve clarity, not noise, or no matter what happens, I will not abandon myself. One sentence, one truth, one law, and from there you act. You don't chase perfection, you uphold alignment, you don't follow feeling, you follow principle, and you don't measure yourself by what others think of you. You measure yourself by how faithfully you obey what you say matters most. Because the world doesn't need more people reacting to everything. It needs people who lead themselves, from within, quietly, unshakably, as if nothing outside could buy their soul. And the only way to become that kind of person is to remind yourself daily, I do not serve the world's urgency, I serve something deeper. So wake up and write your law. The neutralization of anticipated offense. You are going to be misunderstood today. Someone will ignore you. Someone else will speak with a tone you don't like. A plan will fail. A message won't arrive. A delay will interrupt what you thought was solid. And none of this is personal now, unless you decide it is. The sixth habit of a Stoic morning is the neutralization of anticipated offense, the deliberate act of disarming future irritations before they occur. Not by imagining a perfect day, but by accepting an imperfect one before it even begins. This is not pessimism. This is preparedness. Most people walk into their mornings already on edge, even if they don't know it. Their expectations are so fragile, their pride so active, that any interruption feels like an attack. The Stoic mind doesn't operate this way. The Stoic mind expects friction and welcomes it as training. Before you step into your day, you bring the world into your awareness as it is, not as you wish it would be. You remind yourself, people will be people. The loud will speak loudly, the slow will move slowly, the distracted will forget, the entitled will demand. And none of this removes your power to remain clear, strong, and centered. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He wrote to himself that he would meet those who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But he didn't say this with bitterness. He said it with calm realism. Because when you expect storms, you don't curse the wind. You adjust your posture. This habit is your shield, not a wall, not a defense mechanism. A quiet knowing. That offense is a reflex you can unlearn. That irritation is not about what happens, but about how tightly you grip the idea that it shouldn't have. So each morning, the practice begins. You visualize a common scenario, someone disrespecting your boundary, questioning your choices, interrupting your flow. And instead of reacting, you watch. You don't justify, defend, or explain. You breathe. You return to the center. And you remind yourself, this moment is not bigger than me. This person does not control me. This event does not get to shape my state. Why? Because you already met it in your mind before it happened. Seneca said that fortune falls heavily on those who expect nothing but good, but for the one who rehearses reality with dignity, the weight becomes lighter. What used to offend you becomes neutral. What used to trigger you becomes data. And what used to ruin your day becomes a passing cloud. This is mental freedom, not the kind you scream about, the kind you demonstrate. You begin your day not as a victim of tone, delay, noise, or others' immaturity, but as someone who knew it would come and showed up ready anyway. Because when you meet the world expecting it to be flawless, You suffer needlessly. But when you meet it expecting it to be real, you walk through it untouchable. That's what this habit gives you. So before the world offends you, take the offense out of the world. The disassociation from collective haste. Most people aren't rushing toward anything real. They're just afraid of being still. The world runs and you run with it. Not because you chose to, but because stopping feels like falling behind. There's a silent pressure to match the pace of everything. Messages, trends, headlines, expectations. If you pause, you'll be forgotten. If you breathe, you'll be replaced. This is the sickness of collective haste, and it's invisible until you name it. The seventh Stoic habit is this: the daily disassociation from the need to keep up with what doesn't matter, a deliberate break from the crowd's panic, a moment to say, I am not here to chase, I am here to move with purpose. Because if you don't choose your rhythm, someone else will. It begins the moment you open your eyes. Your nervous system is already being calibrated. The pace of your morning becomes the tempo of your thoughts. If you move fast without clarity, you think fast without depth. And soon you're not living, but you're reacting. The Stoic watches this pattern with quiet clarity. He does not hate the world for its speed. He simply refuses to borrow its anxiety. To disassociate from haste is not to rebel. It is to remember that urgency is not the same as importance, that rushing does not equal effectiveness, that stillness is not laziness, it is discipline in its highest form. So the practice begins. You don't leap out of bed into tasks. You don't sprint into decision-making. You don't mimic the chaos of timelines that don't belong to you. You observe your own system. You regulate your mind. You begin the day as if the most powerful thing you can offer is not more movement but more presence, because it is. Stoic slowness is not passive. It's strategic. It's saying, I move when I decide, not when the crowd does. I begin from stillness, not from panic. I respond from center, not from noise. This is a warrior's mindset, not of the body but of attention. When you choose to move slower than the world expects, you see what others miss. You hear what others block out. You resist what others surrender to. You stay grounded while the rest are spinning. Seneca said it best, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. And modern life is built on being everywhere, digitally, mentally, emotionally. The Stoic chooses otherwise, not as protest, but as power. He walks through the morning without sprinting. He allows space between moments. He carries no shame in doing less, because what he does with the full weight of his attention. Disassociation is not withdrawal. It's return. Return to breath, to thought, to command, to the calm rebellion of being unreachable by the world's panic. You don't need to be the fastest. You need to be the most aligned, because the race they're running doesn't always end where you want to go. So don't just start your day, arrive in it, fully, quietly, sharply, and let the world rush past the cultivation of noble silence. Before the world hears your voice, you must hear yourself. But most never do. They wake and they speak to others, to their phones, to the mirror, to their tasks. Noise becomes the first act of the day, a desperate need to fill the space, to prove existence through reaction, to perform certainty where there is only unrest. That's why the eighth Stoic habit is not about speech. It's about its absence and the cultivation of noble silence. This isn't quiet for the sake of it. It's not forced withdrawal. It's not cold distance. It's a ritual of self-respect, a posture of internal listening, a choice to hear the echo of your own mind before the voices of others invade it. The Stoics knew words are not neutral. They come with cost, energy, clarity, direction. And if you spend them before you've gathered yourself, they betray you. They rush to defend what hasn't been attacked. They seek answers before questions are clear. They apologize for convictions you haven't even spoken. So the discipline begins. Silence as a sacred container. You wake, and you remain still, not just in body, but in voice. You allow your thoughts to unfold without interruption. You let them breathe. You watch where they want to go. You don't correct them. You don't judge them. You observe. And in that space, something rare happens. You meet your actual state, Not the one you show, not the one you perform, the real one. Maybe tired, maybe anxious, maybe focused, maybe calm. But it's true, and only from truth can you begin the day with alignment. Noble silence is not passive, it is deeply active. It sharpens the blade of your awareness. It exposes the subtle motives behind your desires. It reveals what you were about to say, but maybe didn't need to. And in that pause, power returns. You begin to realize that many words aren't necessary, that not everything requires response, that not every thought needs to become action, that there's more strength in the man who can hold his mind than in the one who needs to project it. Seneca wrote that a wise man is never more active than when he appears to be doing nothing. And this is what silence gives you: invisible strength, not as performance, as possession. A force that doesn't need to convince or react, because it's already centered. This habit is especially rare today. The modern world celebrates noise, speed, sharing, broadcasting, but the Stoic moves in reverse. He begins with withdrawal, not escape, but formation. He enters the world from within, not from the demands of the outside. You don't need hours, just minutes. A short passage of breath without commentary, a space without screens. A moment where the only thing happening is you, watching yourself be awake, fully, clearly, with no need to justify or narrate. And from this noble silence, everything becomes sharper. You speak less, but say more. You react less, but see more. You do less, but carry more weight in your presence. Because silence is not emptiness, it's preparation. So before you give your voice to the day, give your attention to yourself, fully, quietly, sharply. Let the silence make you ready. The seeding of a single intention. You don't need 10 goals. You don't need a list. You don't need a perfect plan to feel in control of your day. You need one thing, a single intention, planted deep enough that it survives distraction, emotion, fatigue, and doubt. This is the 9th Stoic habit, the daily seeding of a guiding virtue. Not as a concept to admire, but as a standard to live. Because without a central principle, your morning may look clear, but your day will fragment at the first interruption. The Stoics didn't try to do everything. They tried to become something, and then align everything else beneath that. One day it was patience, another restraint, another courage. They didn't collect virtues like trophies, they trained them like muscles, not in abstract philosophy, but in traffic, in conversation, in resistance, in simplicity. And that's where this habit begins. Before you leave the silence of your morning, choose your anchor, not something vague like be better, something usable, something that changes your posture, your tone, your reactions. You name it clearly. Today, I will train presence. Today, I will walk with composure. Today, I will respond with dignity. Today, I will not abandon my calm for what is urgent. Today, I will speak only when I mean it. That's all. One seed. And then you water it, not with repetition, but with awareness. Every time your mind drifts, you return to it. When impatience rises, you remember. When you're about to justify what you shouldn't, you pause. When your old habit tries to lead, you interrupt it. And behind it all is the memory of your morning. This is the day I train this. No one else needs to know. This is not for display, not for reward, not for applause. The world doesn't need to see your intention. It needs to feel it, in your silence, in your attention, in your restraint. Because while others are lost in speed, in pressure, in proving, you are holding a thread. Quiet, steady, one intention woven through everything. This isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming exact. Not wasting energy on a dozen directions, not shifting shape depending on the room, not reacting from old instincts just because they're familiar. The Stoic narrows his effort so that he may deepen his power. And when things unravel, when people fail, when delays strike, when temptation knocks, you don't need to search for your strength. You already planted it. This morning, with clarity, without noise, one word, one standard, one north. And when the day ends, you don't ask if you won or lost. You ask if you remained. Did you stay with it? Did you return when you wandered? Did you represent something inside yourself that no one could steal? If the answer is yes, then the day was yours, no matter what happened in it. So tomorrow, when the morning returns, don't just prepare to act, prepare to be, not everything, just one thing. Unshakably. The return to sovereignty. You are not a machine. You are not a project. You are not an accident responding to forces you can't name. You are a sovereign mind. And every morning is a chance to return to that truth. This is the final Stoic habit, not something to add, something to remember. Before you step fully into the day, you return, not to your schedule, not to your roles, not to the endless requests from the world, but to the seat inside yourself that no one else can sit in. Sovereignty doesn't mean control over others. It means responsibility for yourself, ownership of your breath, ownership of your choices, ownership of your state, not after the chaos but before it begins. The Stoics never promised an easy day, but they prepared for one with power. Not power over circumstance, but power over posture, the way you meet what comes. And this posture must be claimed in silence, every morning, as a ritual, as a return. The world will offer you alternatives. Algorithms will tell you who to be. Notifications will tell you what to feel. Systems will give you someone else's timeline. But you're not here to comply, you're here to lead yourself, not just on paper, but in presence. This habit is not a technique, it's a remembering. You sit, you breathe, and you say, without needing to say it, I am not here to beg for calm. I am here to generate it. I'm not here to mimic other lives. I'm here to embody my own. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be anchored. That is sovereignty. No title gives it to you. No success secures it. No audience sustains it. It is a choice you remake at the start of every day, before performance, before noise, before opinion. And the strength of this habit is not in what it makes you do. It's in what it prevents you from forgetting. Because most forget. They remember the checklist but forget the core. They remember the pressure but forget the presence. They remember who the world expects but forget who they are when no one's looking. That's why you return. To center. To clarity. To the grounded presence of one who is already whole and walks into the day not to prove anything, but to live everything from alignment. You've done this before. You know what it feels like. The difference is now you do it on purpose. And when the world becomes loud, and it will, you don't chase peace, you return to it, because it's where you began, not by chance, but by decision. This is not philosophy. This is war, quiet, internal, daily. And every time you sit before the day begins and say, I know who I am, I know what I lead, I know how I stand, and you win. Before the first noise, before the first conflict, before the first demand. The day bends around the posture you choose in these early private moments, and that posture, that sovereignty, belongs to you, not someday, now, here, before the day begins. Do you already practice any of these habits? Which one is yours? And if not, which one will be the first you commit to building? Don't just keep it in your head, write it in the comments, because the first step to turning a habit into reality is declaring it. And that starts now.